Shalom, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of our weekly Rashi study class with Rabbi Rebecca Schatz.
Aren't going to meet next week, which is the day of the first Seder. So just for those of you who are in the room or for those of you who are listening, just know that. So we're going to have a little bit of a hiatus because the week after is Chag on Wednesday. So we could, if you want, we can't podcast it, but anyway, so we're not going to meet for 2 weeks. And then we will meet the following week. So just keep that in mind. All right, let's get into the Megillah here. Let me pull it up on here so that those on Zoom can see it. Did anybody have any questions or thoughts since last class? I know we kind of ended abruptly last class because class was over, but we were in the middle of a heated conversation. Anybody have any questions or thoughts that they want to just remind us of or pick back up? Okay, great. Well, speaking of intense classes, we are going to, oh, my grandmother is joining us. That's cute. We are going to hear about how excited the king was for all of Vashti's moments. So we're on verse 12. I'm going to say the same thing that I've said for the past 3 weeks. We are going to hear from the rabbis pretty crazy interpretations of this verse that have seemingly no basis in any of the actual context of the Megillah. But again, they are trying to explain to us why certain things happen in the way that they did, especially in a time where there was not the same, let's call it, respect and freedom for women to just do what they wanted. And so that we're coming upon a woman who is changing that. Okay. Does someone want to read for us verse 12 in the Megillah, and then we will get to the Rashi after that? Marshall, you want to read for us? Just take the microphone from Paul.
Timo ein hamalka vashti lavo bidvar hamelech asher biyad hasarisim vayitzof hamelech me'od v'chamato bara'ah bo. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command, conveyed by the eunuchs. The king was greatly incensed, and his fury burned within him.
Okay, before we get into questions that people have or thoughts about this, Rick, not to put you on the spot, but do you mind, but I'm going to, do you mind telling us, just repeating what you said last week about Vetema'en in terms of the trope, but also connecting it back to Joseph?
I'd be happy to. Thank you. So when I was looking at the Pazers, with the king mentioned first, and then the command to come, and then the king again. Next to it, with Amar, was the Ger Shaim on top that looks like 2 hooks, is what Rabbi Ben Asher called it 1,000 years ago. He was the one that gave the name to it, the Ger Shaim. So Amar, both times, had the Ger Shaim, and now here on Vatama'ain, you have the Ger Shaim. So to me, musically, they're linked. And when I see Vatama'ain, I remember Vayima'ain, when Joseph refuses Potiphar's wife's advances.
Yep.
And then the parallel there is Jacob, his father, also refuses to be consoled when he hears that Joseph is missing with a bloody coat. So those link together, and then it just jumped out at me here that she refusing to do a sexual kind of thing relates. So that's what that was.
Great, thank you so much, and thanks for
pleasure.
Being willing to jump in.
Yeah.
Are they all Ger Shaim, Rick? Joel wants to know.
The Amars were. So when he first said, and it was all about what the king says, right? That you can't go against what the king says, even if the king wants to change his mind, which is just stupid on the face of it. But where's the first Amar? We passed it by when he
Joel's talking
said,
about the Joseph piece and
"Oh,
Yaakov.
the Vayima'ain." In the Joseph story, it's in
Yes. Yeah.
Vayeshev, I believe. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. He's asking if in those parshiot the words.
Oh, if it had a
They're saying-
Gershaim on it.
yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I'll take
Okay.
a look.
Okay, great.
take a
Feel free to
I'll raise my hand when I find it.
Okay, great. You can also just interrupt, but great.
Okay, all right.
Thanks, Rick. Okay, any thoughts, comments on this particular verse? On the words. Yes, the words of the verse before Rashi. Yeah, Paul. It's a very big table for one microphone.
One interpretation of why he was so angry is that he needed her for part of the symbolism. Apparently this was a gathering with a great deal of political significance, and so part of the ceremony was that she would be there, and by refusing, she was injuring the ceremony and possibly hurting the power that he was trying to express by holding the ceremony.
Okay, very interesting. So it's possible that the reason that he was so upset was because he had a vision for what this was going to be. And here she was ruining his vision, which, you know, for all that we discussed in last week's verses that seemed to kind of take the agency away from Vashti, this is also, we all can understand this kind of disappointment. I thought something was going to go this way, and then it didn't, right? And so if we want to read it the way that Paul's reading it, which is a really beautiful this isn't a degrading comment, like a PG read of it, which is just like that King Ahasuerus wanted something to go one way. She's now changing that narrative, and so he's mad. Right. And he gets to be, right. He gets to be frustrated. Larry.
So I don't want to comment yet on the motivations.
Yeah.
I just want to focus on the words. So first of all, B'devar HaMelech.
Yeah.
So I see different translations. Alter says, according to the word of the king. And Sansino says, the king's commandment. Right. Yeah. It sounds funny to me. You may tell me that it's not funny at all. Lavo b'devar hamelech, and then asher bayad hasarisim, by the hand of the sarisim, and that's probably just an expression. You'll tell me. Yeah, the king's bidding. And what about the biyad hasarisim? Because sarisim is plural, but maybe it's just biyad at the hand of. So even though it's plural, but I'm wondering if it's not possible to completely reconstruct this first part of the verse and to read it as follows. According to the Sarisim, Vashti refused to appear at the command of the king. In other words, is it the Sarisim who are telling the king that Vashti's refused to come? And maybe she never refused at all. I'm not saying that that's, it strikes me. And then there is an explanation in Sansino that I haven't heard elsewhere. I didn't know that Josephus did commentary. But apparently it says, it's unlikely that the reason for Vashti's refusal is that suggested by Josephus and later writers. That being that it was the law of the Persians that wives should not show their faces to strangers, which seems to me to be in keeping with some traditions, both in Jewish law and Muslim law, about modesty and about covering yourselves. Women. Jewish women don't cover their faces, but they cover lots of other things. And Muslim women, some of them actually cover their faces. So it would seem to me that that maybe makes some sense, despite what the Cincino is saying.
Yes, Norm. Oh, you already have a microphone.
I think to say
Well
that maybe
prepared.
she didn't refuse is kind of hard to swallow, given that the plain language is that she refused to come. But we need to also remember the previous sentence, in which in I'm sorry, in
No,
the
it's okay.
previous sentence,
Yeah.
he wanted to display her beauty because she
Yeah.
was very pretty. Displaying her beauty is not, as Paul suggested, some sort of a ritual thing that's normal.
Mhm.
If it was a normal thing, she would have known in advance to expect that sometime in this period she's going to be asked to come into the other
Right.
room or outside of the courtyard or wherever it is
Sure.
in order to participate in a ritual or whatever.
Sure.
And that invitation or order would have been expected. She would have been prepared for it and undoubtedly would have been prepared to comply in an appropriate fashion.
Yeah.
In this case, we have a king who governs by whim
Mm-hmm.
and orders her to appear.
Mm-hmm.
And we're told about various negative aspects about that order, but it's in mittendrinnen when
Mm-hmm.
she's not expecting it, when she's busy entertaining a bunch of important women. So I think it's very different. He's governing by whim. I think even our queen would not appear if our king suggested to her that she should come on the spur of the moment, drop everything, and show up in front of a bunch of horny, drunk men.
This podcast becomes more and more explicit as we get. Yeah, I think first of all, thank you for reminding us of last week's verse, because my intention, and this just shows how long I feel like it's been since our last class, my intention this morning was to start off by reading last week's verse into this verse. So thank you for reminding us of that, because sometimes it's easy to just jump into the next verse. And sometimes, to your point, Norm, there is context that is important to at least remind ourselves of going into the following verse. I think the first thing that you said, Norm, which was in response to Larry, is that what Larry is suggesting is not that she didn't come or not that she refused to come, but that potentially the king only knew that because the eunuchs said to him, and by the way, she refused to come. It's possible that she didn't say that to them, right? It's possible that the eunuchs are giving a different message than she actually gave, which again, I think is a very interesting read, and just continues to lean into this fact that the agency piece of Vashti is nowhere to be found. Rick has had his hand up for a while, and then Rebecca, and then Diane.
Hi, the Vayima Ain with Joseph, it had a shalshelet on it. I should have remembered that.
Oh,
But so
okay.
there's only 4 of those. So
Yeah.
it's a real high point in the Joseph story. The Jacob, it's just a pashta. Vayima Ain lahit nachem, he refused to be consoled. But the Joseph refusal is the one that I think is really important, because it's in one word, and I think it just underlines her refusal, and it's a big thing. How can you refuse the king?
Yeah. Okay, well, one more thing for you to add to the book that you should be writing, Rick, about trope. Okay, Rebecca, go ahead.
So I wanted to stay a little bit with the direction Rick was taking, but not with respect to the sorry, this just died on me. But I was looking up, trying to find a translation for Vaiktsov and see if it's used a lot, because it kind of means to froth, and it's like an exaggerated kind of anger. And the first place it goes to is again back to Paro, and he's
fascinating
potsefing, as Rabbi Cliff would say, on his sarisim that didn't give him the right drinks, that they would use a problem in his little dining situation.
Right.
So I just think it's interesting. It seems like almost the language is in different places, borrowed from the Joseph story.
Yeah, it's interesting. While people, especially while Rick was making his trope comments, and while you were just sharing, Rebecca, I've been looking to see if any of these other commentaries beyond Rashi, but in Mikro Kadolo, you have Rashbam, and you have Ibn Ezra, and you have the Ralbag, and you have all these people, and none of them seem to be mentioning anything about Joseph, unless in the language that they're using, and obviously I'm just skimming, I'm not learning it right this second, unless the language that they're using is like euphemistic almost to Joseph. I don't know, I would have to read it more closely. But no one seems to be mentioning Joseph, and I think it's so interesting that we've now found, right, when we started the Megillah, which was many, many weeks ago, but only a few verses ago, that one of the things that we were picking so much up on in this class was historical connection. And here it seems to be that we're actually also picking up on historical Torah connection, which also just shows how, quote, modern this Megillah was in terms of other things that had been read or learned or known. And that language, just in terms of acquisition of language, the more you hear it and the more you know it from other things, you use it in other places. So it's very possible that those were stories that were known, that those were similar situations that were had. And therefore they decided, okay, those are the words that we're going to use almost as an homage, right, to this story that happened before, as a way of also showing this story. I have no proof for anything that I just said, but I do think that that's very interesting, and would love for there to be proof, that came before my hypothesis of it. Yeah, Diane.
So I'm wondering why the phrase Biyad HaSarisim is actually there at all, because it doesn't really add anything to the verse. In fact, it maybe takes away from the king's command.
Right.
And why Sarisim? And is it true that the king only sends Sarisim to women because of
who they are,
competition from other men?
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. It's fascinating.
Yeah. Did you want to say something, Larry? Before I respond?
Well, there is an answer.
Oh.
That I think I saw it on Steinsaltz, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
That he was insulted that she sent her answer through the Sarisim and didn't respond to him directly.
And that's why it says Biyad HaSarisim.
Yeah, I don't understand the asymmetry of he can send a messenger,
of course,
message through messengers, but she can't. But that is an explanation.
Right. Okay, that's very interesting. I was gonna come back to the point that Larry made, that Diane kind of doubled down on in terms of the Biyad HaSarisim, right? Why Biyad? Why not Beyadaim or Beyadei, or however grammatically it would have been written if you still wanted to talk about Sarisim in the plural. And my assumption is that by saying Beyad HaSarisim is you are conveying that this was a mob, right? That this was a group of people, and therefore, even though obviously they had multiple yadaim, they had multiple hands, that it wasn't that multiple hands were grabbing her or coming at her, but that they kind of had a similar similar focus, right? That their job all together was to go and to get her, and therefore it was Beyad HaSarisim. And interesting, and then I can see that you want to say something, Larry, but the microphone gave it away. But this idea, right, that the translations that we're seeing here do not say at the hands of, at least in the books in front of me, do not say by the hand of. And yet it's conveyed by, right, is one of the translations, at least here. And Beyad is very physical, right? If you wanted it to be conveyed by, you would have used some kind of verbal type of word in Hebrew, of which there are many, as we know. So the fact that it says Beyad HaSarisim does seem to imply that there was some kind of physical either need or push or force. Again, just because we're talking about sexual things in the Megillah, I just want to point out, I don't mean rape. Like, I'm not implying that. What I'm implying is more so like pushing her to do something that she doesn't want to do. But it does seem to be active and not just verbal. Okay, Larry.
This is made up, and I have no idea where this would go.
Great.
Biyad HaSarisim, they handed him a note. She had written down her refusal. And writing something down is really You can't take it back, as we're going to learn later on,
Mhm.
because when the king signed the decree, he couldn't take the decree back.
Yeah.
So once she has, again, I'm making this up.
Yeah.
Once she's written down her refusal and they handed that to the king,
Yeah.
that was the end.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Okay, Norm, and then Marshall's going to read the first Rashi for us.
We also know who the Sarasim were because 2 lines earlier they were listed by name.
Correct. Yeah.
The 7 eunuchs,
Mm-hmm.
which includes most notably Harvona,
Mm-hmm.
who we should remember for goodness, because he has an important role here and later,
Mm-hmm.
and has no descendants to remember him due to no fault of his own.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Great. Well. Okay.
One question here is, in English, it looks like conveyed by the eunuchs refers to the king's command, but it sounds like they're conveyed by the eunuchs is the refusal from the discussion. So which is it?
So that's the conversation. Yeah, so that's the conversation we've been having. Is it's unclear, which I think to Larry's first point is it's really interesting to wonder that question. I don't personally know the the answer. It seems to be when we get to the next part of the story that that it came from her, that she refused, etc. But to Larry's point, right now, if we're looking at only this verse, it's very ambiguous as to who it came from and who shared it. Okay, Marshall, take us into the Rashi here.
Okay, I'm going to actually read it sentence by sentence. So
Great.
Able to, and I'll read the English afterwards.
Yeah,
for a better
perfect.
sense.
Great, I love it.
But Ein Hamalka Vashti,
Yeah.
Queen Vashti refused.
Mm-hmm. Just move it closer to your face.
Okay. Okay. Lefi parchava tzara'at kadesh tima'en v'tehareg. Our rabbi said because leprosy broke out on her, so that she would refuse and be executed. Lefi shahayata mafshetet benot Yisrael arumot, because she had forced Jewish girls to disrobe. Ve'usava hen malacha b'Shabbat, and make them do work on Shabbat. Nigzar aleha shetipashet aruma b'Shabbat. It was decreed upon her to be stripped naked on Shabbat.
Okay, any thoughts? Anybody see any factual evidence for any of that? Okay, hold on before we get to you, Norm. This is I feel like a broken record, but this is the rabbis trying to teach us something about a tradition that they want us to keep through the punishment and the reward of the characters in the Megillah. Yes, it said the 7th day. That is true in the Megillah that we've already read. And there were rabbis who were consistent, who believed that meant that it was Shabbat. That being said, it didn't say anything about malacha. It didn't say anything about naked women. None of that was said in the Megillah. There are commentators who have brought that in all along the way as a punishment to who Vashti is seen to be. But it does not say that anywhere. That is nowhere in the Megillah. And part of my reason for continuing to say this class after class after class is because it's really important for us to recognize. Have any of you ever read the book Something from Nothing, the kids' book, where they make the talit, or it's not talit, it's like a garment of some sort. The little boy makes a thing with his grandfather. Anybody? No one knows this book. Oh, it's a beautiful book. Anyway, the point of the book is not really the point. What I want you to know from that book, and I can bring it next time so you can see it, is every page of this book has a main illustration, and on the bottom, let's call it ribbon of each page, are little mice underneath the house who are taking the scraps from the garment that the grandfather, I can't remember the character, is creating for his child. And so the scraps are being dropped down into the floorboards, and these mice are creating their own thing. The commentators are the mice, right? They are creating their own story. The illustration is the Megillah, right? So when I teach commentaries to kids for the first time, I bring that book because it's a really beautiful depiction of what commentators can do. And it shows that there is this really rich and vibrant and amazing, and I'm not trying to degrade it at all, culture of the rabbis coming up with stories to tell their own story as to what's happening here, which, by the way, we all do in this class all the time. So we're part of that. But what Rashi is sharing here, no factual basis whatsoever. It's a story. It's a story he's telling to try to explain what possibly could have been on everybody's mind. Yeah, Matt. Did you mean to unmute? Probably not. Okay, Norm, go ahead.
I just want to give Rashi credit that
sure.
he's not claiming that this is true or that he came up with it. He
For sure.
specifically opens by saying, Rabosenu Amru, he's saying, we have this received tradition. By his time, it was already a received tradition.
Yep.
And he's not necessarily endorsing it.
Oh, correct. Which is why I didn't say Rashi specifically. The rabbis. Yeah, exactly. 100%. Yeah, Diane.
So questions.
Yes.
No answers.
Great. Me neither.
Tzarat is normally a punishment for Lashon Hara.
That's also Midrash, but yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where's the Lashon Hara here?
Right. Great question.
And people aren't generally executed when they have Tzarat. So why would this actually be cause for Vashti to be executed?
Yeah.
So none of that makes any sense to me.
Great. So I'm so glad that you brought up the Tzara'at piece, because we're about to get to it in our Torah in 3 weeks, something like that. And one of the aspects of Tzara'at that we know from Midrash is that it comes from, because of Miriam, it comes from a place of Lashon Hara, right? It actually doesn't say that in the Torah, so to speak. In Tazria Metzora, where it's first really brought to our attention. That being said, to Diane's point, you get taken out of the camp and then you get brought back in, right? And there are elements of what the rabbis claim to be a type of death, right? Because there can be ways in which you, but no execution, right? There's no execution that's done because of. Okay, Joel wants to say something. It seems about Tzara'at, and then we'll go to Barry.
I don't think it's saying that she's going to be executed because she got Tzara'at. She got Tzara'at so she wouldn't feel like she was presentable.
Oh,
so she would have to
interesting.
refuse, and refusing usually is a death penalty.
Oh, that's interesting. That's great. That's a helpful read. Okay, Barry.
So this side story that the rabbis are building about the Jewish women being mistreated brings up, for the first time in the Esther story, that Jews in this time in Persia were a degraded population.
Well, what?
A degraded population.
Degraded population.
And it sort of brings a hinting coming up to Pesach, the idea that the release. So in a sense, this Purim story is a prelude to the Pesach story.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, Alan.
I'm a bit confused about the line, because she would force Jewish girls to disrobe and make them do work on Shabbat.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just really a far removed statement about what Vashti would otherwise be doing. And this is Chazal saying that this is what Vashti was going to do.
You don't seem confused. You seem right on the money. That's all accurate thus far.
Okay.
Yeah, I will change the word confused to disappointed, right? There's a disappointment, I think. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong. That's not the right word to use, but there's a disappointment in our rabbis for somehow vilifying this character just to teach us something about how to treat others and how to celebrate Shabbat, right? Like that. This has nothing to do with that. And in many ways, what this is doing, like those little mice in the story that I'm talking about, is to teach us something about how to treat other human beings, and also what we're not supposed to do on Shabbat unless we want to be punished, right? And that seems to be at the expense of a human being, which is unfair. But I don't think you're confused. I think you're reading it, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, it seems it's like midah keneged midah. That says, well, it's out of nowhere that they're saying that since you would force Jewish girls to get naked, now therefore we're going to decree that you're going to have
Correct.
to be naked.
Correct. Yep. It seems to be that the king feels as though there is a right to be able to do this because she was doing it to other girls, right? And so if you're doing it to your women, why can't I do it to you? But that's not actually ever said, right? So again, that
really-
seems to be a potential reason in the commentary's mind, but it's not actually in the Megillah. Before we go to more people in the room, just Paul, you've had your hand up, and then Rick, and then Larry and Diane.
So, Rabbi, when Rashi quotes these rabbis as saying leprosy broke out, she should refuse and be executed. Were those rabbis saying this is the oral Torah? This is what God told Moses. This is the truth, or were they saying we've heard this?
I think it's more the latter. I think it's more we heard this.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that they don't believe that it came from a place of validity, right? But I don't think they're saying this is what God said. I think it's coming from a place of this is the story we heard. This is kind of the lore that was taught about this is as such.
Okay, thank you.
Right. So Joel just pointed out without the microphone, so I'll just repeat it, that God gave us enough information to deduce this, right? That seems to be what the rabbis feel like they know what to say because of the information they've been given. Okay, Rick.
On the idea that women are talking to each other, and that's a bad thing because they come up with all these ideas, and you can't have that.
Yeah.
So
Also in the 21st century, but yeah.
Yeah, the thing with Miriam talking against the second wife of Moses, the Cushite woman, right? I don't even think we get her name, right? So at the very beginning, his provinces, his kingdom empire runs to Cush. So I knew it was in my head there somewhere. Mehodu ve'ad Cush. So it's another parallel to
Nice job, Rick. Yeah.
Thank you. The Cushite woman.
Yeah, very good.
And then it's going to come up, what are the women talking about against their husbands and all that. So it's the underlying theme, one of them.
Yeah, that was very good. Very, very good. I just want to read something from this book very quickly, and then Larry, I think you had your hand up. So I'm reading from the commentary from the Talmud, Midrash, Classic Rabbinic Commentaries, and the Chabad Rebbes. So just to give you a context as to who I'm reading from, and it doesn't actually give one particular note as to who said what I'm about to share with you. I don't think. It says it's from Torat Menachem. Still doesn't give us a name. Anyway, okay. I'm just going to read this commentary because I think this continues to speak into the world that I'm trying to illustrate for all of us. So we get this piece from Rashi that is also quoted here, and then it goes on to say, this explains why the Megillah mentions that it was on Shabbat that Vashti was summoned, a seemingly irrelevant detail. Agreed. It also explains why Vashti was punished. Granted, Vashti's dethronement led to Esther's rise, but she would not have been dethroned unless she deserved it, says the Rebbe. So one of the things that we need to, and this is somewhat to Paul's point, one of the things we need to recognize is the rabbis aren't just sitting around trying to make up stories. They know the whole story of the Megillah. So they're trying to say, okay, well, we know that at some point Esther has to come onto this scene. How do we get Vashti out of the picture? And how do we, because this is how good storytelling goes, how do we pin Vashti against Esther, right? We can't have two really strong leader women. We have to have one who wasn't as great and then another that comes up and is really just a special gem that we can then say, oh, well, if Vashti had been blah, 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 then maybe we wouldn't have needed Esther. I'm not saying any of that is fact. That's what the Rebbe seems to be saying was needed in terms of the commentary to then get us to a place where we could learn about and read the story of Esther. Give us a little comic relief here, no pun intended.
I don't know if this is going to be comic.
Okay.
Diane and I finished watching the movie Sinners last night.
Oh, uh-huh.
And then we said, well, what was this really about? or what was the message. So I went to ChatGPT and it gave a long explanation that had Diane scratching her head that I thought was actually wonderful. I have no idea where I got it from. And then read some other reviews trying to understand what's going on. And they're all telling stories behind the story. So full stop.
Yeah.
That's what the rabbis are doing.
Yeah.
And Gorfinkel and Natan,
Yeah.
who did this illustrated
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
they've done the same thing.
Totally. 100%.
Now turn to your page 19. Maybe you can show
Yeah,
it.
of course. Yeah.
So it's fascinating. In their pictures of the verse, in the first frame in verse 12, what you see is the Sarasim going to Vashti, and there's like a caption, a little what they're thinking,
Right.
and it's showing the king smiling, and then they're showing the Vashti being manhandled by a mob. And that's what they're saying that the king intended to happen. And in the big frame, then the Sarasim just are going to the queen to convey this message. She gets furious and she stands up and she screams at them and bowls them over. So the Sarasim are suddenly they're thrust back.
Yeah.
And then they go to the king, and now he's furious, and he screams at them and bowls them over again. The poor Sarasim, Norm said through no fault of their own, they're all being all I'm saying is,
Yeah. Right. That's very, Joel just said that that's not the worst thing that happened in their lives.
What these guys have done in these frames, and now I'm going to have to go through really carefully as we go through. They have their own.
Yeah,
they're mice. They're the mice below.
Correct. Yeah.
And they've woven this other fabric, which I hadn't thought about. We hadn't thought about. That's what the rabbis are doing.
Right.
And that's what people are doing who watch the movie Sinners and saying, well, what's really going on? This is not really about vampires. What this is really about. This is what we do as human beings.
Yeah,
so
beautiful.
don't be so surprised that the rabbis came up with these weird stories.
100%. Yeah. Beautiful. And if I can try to show, for those on Zoom, I can try to show the picture, or I'll take a picture and send it or something of this graphic novel. You know, every moment that we talk about a text, we are giving it its own, our own, but its own interpretation, right? As soon as someone puts words on a page or says something to another human being, it's now being interpreted in a different way, right? And so the fact that these are even called Megillot just lends itself to that, right? The idea that something was being told as a story is for us to be able to figure out, what is this about? And so the rabbis, I do not blame the rabbis at all for doing what they're doing, or the graphic novels of our day doing what they're doing, or this class doing what we are doing, right? And I want us to recognize some of what we come up with, some of what the commentators are coming up with, is to wrap their own brains in their own worlds, in their own lives, around what possibly could be happening, because the Megillah is only giving us the story in the Megillah's words, right? As opposed to the world that we live in. So that was all like a very meta point on this verse. We're going to go to the next Rashi in a second, but yeah, Rebecca, here we go.
What stood out for me from what you said about having to get rid of Vashti for the story is really that there is some progress here, because in other places in the Bible, you didn't really have to get rid of one wife to have another.
True.
So in a way, we can also see this as like progress.
Yeah.
Because
Good
you have
point.
to be killed off for
That's true. There
That
was
is
still
true.
a favored, right? But you're right that there are multiple, in lots of our stories, there are multiple women who are playing different roles. And to Norm's point, there usually is one that is either the favored or at the top or the queen or whatever. Okay, Marshall, will you take us to the next Rashi? And then I don't think we need to spend too much time on this Rashi because we've already kind of anticipated it, but then take us into the Megillah text as well.
Okay, by Tzof Sheshalcha lo divrei Gedai, angered because she sent him words of insult.
Just to point out, I'm just going to say one thing on this, and then Marshall. I was going to say then Rashi. Then Marshall is going to take us to the next text here. But Vaiksuf is one of the words that's used for God when God gets very angry at the people. Usually it's before Vayichar Af, right? There's usually kind of all those words often go together. So just as a reminder that this is a word that we know is kind of like an ultimate type of anger, not just wow, that's really frustrating. I'm so peeved, right? Okay, Marshall, read the Talmud for us, which we're not going to, well, just read it for us.
Okay.
Please.
Vatimo'en hamalka Vashti. The verse states, but Queen Vashti refused to come. Mikdi Pritzta Havai. Gemara asked, since she was immodest, the Amar Mar, as the master said above, Shnehem Lidvar Aveira Nitkavnu. My Tama Lo Atai. The two of them had sinful intentions. What is the reason she did not come? Amar Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina said, Melamed Sheporcha Ba Tzaraat. This teaches that she broke out in leprosy, and Steinsaltz's comment, and therefore she was embarrassed to expose herself publicly. An alternative reason for her embarrassment, B'matnita Tana, Ba Gavriel Ba'asala Zanav.
Anybody heard that? Has anybody heard that before? This is my favorite Gemara to teach kids about Purim, that Vashti couldn't come out of her party room, whatever we teach them, because she had a tail all of a sudden. Okay, keep going. Great, awesome. Now she has a tail.
Okay, yeah, Gabriel came and fashioned her a tail. Okay. Vayitzof HaMelech Ma'od. The verse continues, therefore the king was very wrathful, and his anger burned in him. Amad Dalaka Be Kulehai. Why did his anger burn in him so greatly? Merely because she did not wish to come. Amar Rava said, Shlacha Le. She also sent him a message by way of a messenger. Bar Ahuriyat Re de Abba. You, son of my father's stableman, Ahuriyat, who is explained here to be Belshazzar. Abba La Kavel Alpa Chamra Shate Velo Razeh. My father drank wine against 1,000 men and did not become inebriated. Vahu Gavra Ishtati Bechamre.
And this is from Daniel, which Stevie quoted a few weeks ago,
Right.
just to bring us back into that for a second.
So the last part, as the verse in Daniel 5:1 testifies about him, Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. And that man, referring euphemistically to Ahasuerus himself, has become senseless for his wine. V'chamato ba'aravo. Due to her audacity, immediately his anger burned in him.
Okay, so talk about creating a story here. We are now using proof texts so that we understand why the this, that, and the other thing. So I just want to point out, the reason I brought this is not for us to have a lengthy conversation about the Talmud, but for you to see that this is not just commentators, right? This happened pre the commentators. Where the rabbis who were sitting around, or even just students before they were rabbis sitting around a Beit Midrash, read these verses and thought, okay, where else have we seen this? Let's come up with a proof text. And now let's work that proof text into our own characters and understand how this might have come to be. So we don't have to get into the Daniel piece, and we don't have to it is very interesting. And if this class was about all of Nach, I'd be happy to go into it. But I just wanted you to see that, yes, Rashi is doing this and all these other commentators in our Mikro Gedolo. And at the same time, the rabbis, even pre-Rashi, were doing this as part of what has now become our Talmud, our Gemara. Yeah, Diane. And then we're going to go on to another verse. We're going to do 2 verses today, guys. It's thrilling. We're making progress. We're going to get through chapter 1 before Rabbi
This
Class
is what
gets back.
Benji Siegel says.
Yeah.
The reader of chapter 1 encounters an unusual story and strange events. Puzzlement engenders curiosity and a desire to read on. As it turns out, the events, the dismissal of the queen, the banquets, the decisions, and even some personal traits, the king and the eunuchs, resonate later in the book. So does the tone of irrationality. Included in the anticipating emphases are grandiose presentation and hyperbole. The male ego and the ridiculous effort to control women are also recalled later as Esther emerges and as Haman seeks direction from his wife. So basically he's saying this is just good literature.
Correct. Right. And to go back to the lovely spiel that that was done in the Library Minion, or I guess not in Library Minion, whatever, you know what I mean, by Library Minion folk. Right, when we think about shows like Bridgerton, right, like it's just really good show literature, entertainment, and yes, sure, you could open it up and deepen it and wonder what it's all about. Same as Sinners, which I haven't seen, but I've heard similar commentary once people have watched it. Right? Like, what is this about? Sure, you could go down that road, and that is very interesting conversation. You could also just read something and be entertained by it and move on, right? Which is not what we're doing in this class, but you could. And I think that Vashti is that character. Vashti is the character that really allows us to sink our teeth into what are the morals and the values and the reasons and the subtext and all those things. When we get to these other characters, I think some of that will be possible and interesting. Vashti, and this is why when we started talking about her character, I said this was going to take us longer. Vashti's really, really, really interesting because she's so different from the rest of the text. And her story is so unique, even though it's like, 5 verses. It's so unique to what this Megillah is trying to teach us. Marshall. He needs the microphone, Rebecca. And then we're really going to go to the next verse right after this. Oh, Rick, sorry. Rick will be our last word on this verse.
I'm just reminded of one of my favorite words in rabbinic literature.
Yeah.
Is darsheni.
Yes, very good.
Interpret me.
Totally.
That we're not to read the text without interpretation.
Yeah, 100%.
And
yeah.
It sort of causes me now to think back about a book that I read by my teacher, Richard Rubinstein, over 50 years ago, called The Religious Imagination, which, if I recall correctly, it is a psychoanalytic evaluation of rabbinic legends. And I think he based it largely on Ginsburg's book, Legends of the Jews. But it was a wonderful volume, and it came out right after his magnum opus, the first of his magna opera of after Auschwitz.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. It looks like everybody's writing down that book, the book title. Okay, Rick, last word on this verse, and then someone else is going to read verse 13 for us.
Hi. Okay, so
hello.
I can't let the ta'ama go by in the Aramaic. My tama lo ata. What was her thinking, or what was the meaning? Ta'am, of course, is trope, is accent, is flavor. It means all sorts of things. So anyway, it's there. I got to talk about it. So what I think of, because I'm weird, in the margin on page 128 of our Siddur, the red Lev Shalem, it's Psalm 34. David changes his ta'amo, he changes his countenance, his mind, his appearance, because he doesn't want to go to Avimelech, so he pretends like he's crazy, and then Avimelech says, what do I need another crazy person for? I got enough of those in my Philistine court. So I just like the parallel between Vashti and her reaction, her countenance, her face, whatever, and the parallel to David there. And it's also alphabetical, if I could throw in one more. The Psalm 34. And when you get to the tet, it's ta'amu ur'u ki tov Adonai. And the English is judge for yourself and see that God is good. So we're judging what Vashti's reaction is and the king reaction, and what good we can come out of it is my interpretation there. But I just like the ta'am repeating there.
I think my tama is like one of the most reused phrases in the Gemara. So I hope that every time you read the Gemara and you see my tama, you can come up with as beautiful of a drash as you just did to the connection that it's being used. But thank you for sharing that. What's the reason?
The weird translation Rick just read, the Talmud, because the translation is normally taste.
Right.
and see how good God is.
Uh-huh.
Life's long, that's
Great. I'm not going to go on record as saying that. Okay. Verse 13, Joel. Oh, Rebecca. I just thought Joel was doing it because he had the microphone.
I didn't. I am. It's only on my phone, huh?
Joel has decided you're reading verse 13. Okay. Rebecca's reading verse 13.
ויאמר המלך לחכמים יודעי העיתים, כי כן דבר המלך לפני כל יודעי דת ודין. It is a hard.
It's very poetic, and as you can kind of hear, it's a little bit melodic, right? Even without the trope, the words are melodic.
And then the king consulted the sages. It says here, learned in procedure. That wasn't my first
go for
understanding of it.
Sure.
It would have either been that are knowledgeable of the day or of time. But I thought maybe it was also like oracles that could see to the future. But I don't know if that's anything.
Yeah.
For it was the royal practice before to go before and all those versed in law and precedent. Again, I'm not sure that that's the correct
translate the way that you would have translated.
I would have said, and the king said to the wise people that know, that keep time, that this is that are, that write down, I guess, what happened at every moment, maybe, that this is what the king said in front of everybody that is aware of law and justice, but maybe precedent, I guess. So anyway, not sure.
Great. I'm just gonna speak to Rebecca's hesitation around the translation, because it is a tricky verse in terms of how to translate it. Again, it's very poetic in its Hebrew, and therefore in its English, it's not exactly the way that I think the Hebrew meant for it to be understood, but we are putting English to Hebrew so that we can understand it. Ibn Ezra says that this idea of Yodea Ha'itim is to understand past experiences and precedents as well as the current, right? So that kind of, to your point of understanding this as Yodea Ha'itim, of the time, right? A person of the times, or people of the times, but also of this understanding of past and present, and maybe even future, though that's not mentioned, but understanding that there is that recognition or understanding or general feeling around that's not really the word I was looking for, time and what was going on in each of them.
Like a historical kind of
yes,
view of.
Exactly, a historical view, exactly. Okay, Marshall and then Diane.
For me, though, Alter gives an alternative interpretation.
Great.
Where he translates it, and the king said to the sages, experts in protocol, for thus was a king's practice before all the experts in rule and law. In his commentary, experts in protocol, team, the literal meaning is knowers of the times.
Yeah.
But the end of the verse argues for this sense. Then he adds, one notes that the sentence beginning here sprawls over two relatively long verses, another departure from the stylistic norms of First Commonwealth Hebrew narrative.
Yeah. Right. Great. And the idea of protocol, right, which for anybody who's been on a board or part of an organization that's gone through a visioning process, right, there might be bylaws, there might be protocols, but things also change with the times, right, because nothing can stay the same for forever. Things have to change given how vision is changing, how knowledge is changing, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you Thank you for that, Diane.
So etim could actually literally mean time.
Correct.
Which could have to do with astrology.
Could
Could also have to do with scientists who study the phases of the moon. Maybe that made them wise counselors.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, that's right. That's sort of indicated in the picture here.
Huh. Okay, great. I just because of time, I just want us to do this Rashi, and then I also just realized that I forgot to add the next verse, so I'll do that before next week. But let's do Rashi for verse 13, and then next week, or not next week, in a few weeks we'll do verse 14.
כי כן דבר המלך, כי כן מנהג המלך בכל משפט, לשום את הדבר לפני כל יודעי דת ודין. So that is the tradition or the practice, the custom of the king in every judgment or every sentence to put the matter in front of those that are knowledgeable and versed in procedural and legal concerns. So I guess he's saying basically this is the usual thing.
Right. So I'm not going to give away a story that I'm sure that Rabbi Clakefield will end up sharing with the community, but a story that I was just with him at a conference and he shared this really insane story with me. I felt like I was watching a movie. And one of the things that he shared about a character in this story is that there are people in different places in this world for whom they could be the main lawmaker, but they are also, the main philosopher, and they are the whoever. And he said it was this particular character was like meeting a common day Yitro, right? Like the guy who sits as the main judge, but also knows everything about the laws and the procedures and that's not really how we understand our leadership in today's day. That's not a comment on our leadership, just to be clear. That's just not how our leadership, whether or not we like them, leads, right? Not the King of England and not the President of the United States. That's not how people lead in today's day. In our worlds, but there are places in other parts of this world and in our history where there are people, whether that's because they're part of a small community or because there just aren't other people who are as knowledgeable, who have to kind of be the keeper of all the stuff. Right. And that seems to be what the king was at this time. And Rashi wants us to know that the fact that he consulted with other people means that this was a rarity, right? This was a moment in the king's existence where he didn't have all the answers. He didn't know all the, quote, legal procedures around what to do in a situation where your wife isn't going to come when you beckon her. The way that this verse is set up is that Vayomer Hamelech lechachamim, right? The king says to the chachamim who know all this stuff and who have known stuff before and potentially who know stuff in this particular time, whether it's astrological or in terms of just laws and procedures. But then what Rashi is pointing out to us, which I think is so important, is that means that the king was baffled because he should have been the guy who knew all of this stuff, right? Who knew all of these matters and potentially, though Rashi doesn't say this, shouldn't have had to have gone to Chachamim to figure it all out, because it says it was the king's custom to, and it says to present the matter, but it actually doesn't. Ki chen minhag, hamelech b'chol mishpat lashum et hadavar, to lasum, et hadavar. I can't read for some reason. To like place the davar, right? To put it before, but that doesn't mean for consultation. That means to be able to say like, this is the law. This is the understanding of what's going on. So Rashi is surprised that he now needs to go to the Chachamim. So yeah, Rebecca.
He's like saying this happened, and he also made sure that it was written down as precedent.
Right.
Like,
I think so. That's what it seems. That's what Rashi's comment seems to mean to me. Okay, Barry, last word for a few weeks.
I just think about the character of this Ahasuerus king. That he's not purely emotional. He at this heated moment chooses to consult rather before acting.
Great. Yeah, exactly. Just like every good leader, right? Every good leader, even if they feel like they know everything or they were brought aboard because they know everything, should have people for whom they consult and they ask questions to and they bring things in front of. Okay. Thank you all for learning. I will truly miss this for the next few weeks. But have a Zissen Pesach, as they say. And I hope that it's wonderful and that you get some time with family and friends. And I'll see you in a few weeks.
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast website or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, please visit www.tbala.org.